And his orchestra.
Good evening, everybody. Well, hey, Miles, look who is here already, everybody. Miles, how come you're all wet? Is there a good reason you're all wet, Miles? Oh, you went and got in the tub. Okay. Hey, Tracy. Hey, Martin. Hey, Chris. Evening, Nancy and Bruce. Hey, Karen. Miles.
Let's dance, and that's no
Hey, Darlene on YouTube.
Because it comes from Benny Goodman and his orchestra, who take their responsibilities very seriously in purveying good music to the dancing public. And now, an original arrangement by Benny Goodman.
Hey, Betsy.
Jingle Bells.
I like that. They take their responsibilities very seriously in providing good music to the dancing public. That's kind of like what I do. I take my responsibility very seriously in providing good history to the live stream public. Hey, Dad. Hey, Jerry. Hey, Laura. Hey, Mary Jo. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Lorena. Hey, Octavio. Here's a song about drag racing. Hey, Lorena. Hey, Natalie. Hey, Miles. Miles, you are all wet from the tub. Miles loves fire and water and air. I don't know about earth. Hey, Bob. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Mom. Hey, Casey. Hey, Adam. Miles. What have you done? Sorry, I gotta close out some windows you brought up. Hey, Gene. Miles. Hey, Heather and Denise. A little purr box on me right now. Hey, Christy. Evening, everybody. Miles is just kind of determined to drive me nuts today. Hey, here he hops up again. Hey, Evelyn. Hey, Eileen. Miles Random Files Tour? No, we're not going to do that. Hey, Don on YouTube. Hey, everybody. Been a long day of Johann Hochbook work. That's been my whole day. Right now, really, all I'm doing is just finding and arranging all the quotes and making sure I got everything sourced. Getting everything in order. But I'm up to about 1903. I'll just turn this so you can all see Miles here. He's just lying here purring and purring and purring today. Hey, Laurie.
Benny Goodman and his orchestra playing in the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman playing Where Am I?
Hey, Casey. Hey. Hey, Cindy in Detroit and Jean. Evening, Gladys. Hey, everybody. Miles. Now he's on this side. Hey, Amy, hey, Marie. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Denise. That's about as much holiday music as you're likely to get out of me. But it fits the mood for this tour, so. Hey, Teresa, glad you made it. Ronnie, people say bless you. Hey, Heather. Alright, Miles, you want to just stay up here this whole tour? You can do that. You can just stay up here. Stay in one place. Try to keep your tail off of the keyboard, okay? Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Megan. Hey, Eileen. Hey, Karen over on YouTube. Hey, Ann. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Laura. Evening. Miles. No. Oh, dear. Miles. At least he's not trying to climb up my back right now. How about if I move it over to here and you have some space there by the lamp? Here, lie down, okay? You have to stop doing that. Hey, Rhiannon. Okay, yeah, hop on down. Don't knock over the record, please. That's a 2 LP set. Evening, everybody. Welcome along. Get started here in a few minutes. Hey, Vicky. So you have a space on the chair here. There's a chair over there. Or on the desk. Any number of places that you could just kind of park and be nearby but not in the way.
And that was Helen Ward singing, appearing more
That's a shoe.
bewilderingly lovely than
You're not going to fit in the shoe.
And
Evening, Eleanor. Hey, Aaron and Jeff.
You forgot to remember.
Hey, Arlie. That's good, but I can only see the first couple of lines of a comment on here. As I really put. Good line, though. Jennifer, congrats. Should name it Adam. Obviously. Hey, Grandma Belle. Evening, Joanne. Hey, Ann. Miles, where'd you go? Miles. He just kind of humped and walked off. Hey, Tony. Hello, Bella, and hey, Courtney. Evening, everybody. Good crowd tonight. Oh, I forgot to pour myself a drink. Week I'm having is quite in order. I've got some Y86. Hey, Elaine. Y86 of the Jepson's Bourbon, which is delicious. Y86 wasn't my favorite barrel, but I gotta save the favorite barrel for a nice snowy day. Hey, Darlene. Bella, the background, this is an old Marshall Field shot. From long, long ago. Hey, Cindy. Hey, Chris. When was this picture taken? I want to say this is mid-20th century. It looks colored but not colorized. Howdy, Judy. Evening, Evelyn.
And now here is the piano
Evening, everybody. We're going to let Benny Goodman do one more tune for us here before we get started properly.
The music goes around and around.
Snow and sludge at 3 a.m. All right. That's coming to Kenosha. It might hit us down here. Now it just looks like it's going to be rainy tomorrow here. Oh, dear. That's going to make for a fun Find a Grave Friday. Hey, Florecita. Oh, did I bite my tongue earlier? That bourbon is burning. Hey, dear, I did stop in after I was done at the Legal Archives the other day. At the Chris Kindle Market. I wanted some alpaca socks. I got some alpaca socks. They're still not as good, honestly, as the merino wool LL Beans. Or not as thick, anyway. But I wore them for ice skating yesterday, and they were just about perfect because they were warm but not too thick. Ah, listen to that. Trombone. Hey, Nancy in Denver. All right, we'll let Betty finish up this one more tune, then we will get started properly here.
The National Broadcasting Company is presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago.
All right, that was Benny Goodman coming to you live from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And all right, that means it is time for us to get started, so welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now, author of such books as Mysterious Chicago, The Book, The Smart Aleck's Guide to American History, H.H. Holmes' The True History of the White City Devil, Flickering Empire, How Chicago Invented the U.S. Film Industry, co-wrote with Michael Glover Smith, with whom I'm taking a trip to Minnesota next month. Nobody goes on trips to Minneapolis and living in Duluth in January, except for real heroes. That's who. Also, Murder Maps USA, new from Thames and Hudson, and Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets, new this year from University of Illinois Press, probably my favorite of all of my books. I'm also on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time, still getting media requests from the time I froze a pair of pants and set them up in the street 2 years ago, too. So I am incredibly famous, and you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. This is really one of my favorite talks that I do, is the shopping history in Chicago. It's just regularly would be kind of off-brand for me to do something like this. Nobody gets murdered in this one, I don't think. Well, pretty close. There's a little bit of scandal within here, but this is one of my favorite ones to talk about. You can connect so much of world history to American history to the history of society and culture just to shopping within the Chicagoland area, just around State and Lake area. There's just so much history. We're going to start back in the earlier history of Chicago, the early history of people when people actually started living here, which was around the time of Fort Dearborn. There have been a couple of permanent settlers before this time period, about like 1805, 1806, but not very many of them. It was just this little place set up about like this. At the time, a guy by the name of John Kinsey was the sutler of the place. He was the one supplying stuff to the soldiers at Fort Dearborn and could really charge pretty much whatever he wanted to at the time. We don't really know what John Kinsey looked like. There's a couple of drawings that go around, but they're usually actually his son. People who knew him said he looked like this British politician. How the hell they knew what this guy looked like at the time, I really have no idea, but it was generally agreed that this guy is about what he looked like. And his house would have been right about over here, about where Tribune Tower is now. Whereas Fort Dearborn itself was just across the river where the London Guarantee Building is today. And one of the earliest stores to set up here in the 1830s, when people started really moving here in any numbers, there was a place not too far away from here, just around the bend, called the Sauganash Hotel. It would have been right up here on the corner of what is now Wackerin Lake, though probably like lower down to the ground than we are right here, because everything's been re-landscaped so many times by now. But right up here on the corner, the Sauganash Hotel. Next to it was a little apothecary shop run by Philo Carpenter, a big Underground Railroad guy. This is supposed to be H.O. Stone, the mortgage broker, riding into town to stay at the Sauganash Hotel. Now, the Sauganash Hotel was, by most accounts, not really a hotel so much as it was a tavern. But it was a place where people could gather, a place where people could buy things. Also kind of mark the spot where we are right there. Now, at the time, Chicago looked a little bit different than it does right now. We can see right today, you see the river extends all the way over my head here and goes straight out to the lake a few blocks east of Michigan Avenue. At the time, it was a little bit different. At the time, it looked sort of like this. And it got to Michigan Avenue and took this right-hand turn resembling an elephant trunk, then joined the lake down to about Madison Street. But eventually, as the city started to grow, they got rid of this sandbar, dredged a little bit so that instead the water would go straight out. The guy who did this was a guy by the name of Orsemus Morrison, also our first coroner, who had previously worked on the Erie Canal. Now, off on the other side of the river, on the other side of the canal, I'm going to move into Old Lake Street here. But just keep the Erie Canal in mind. It's going to come up again. Now, Lake Street today looks is not really the shopping center anymore, largely because it has been just covered up over the years by the L tracks that go over Lake Street. But this is how it looked circa like 1860 or so. At the time, if you proceeded down lake a little ways, you'd eventually come to the Tremont House, Ira Couch's hotel. And over in this general vicinity was one of our first major stores, L.D. Olmsted & Co. on Lake Street. Fancy and staple dry goods. That's what we should all be investing in right now. Staple dry goods. Not the fancy goods, just the staple goods. Cash for the fancy goods. I also do love this ad for T.B. Carter's on Lake Street. Shawls! Shawls! Among the many desirable goods now offered by T.B. Carter. It is a large and choice lot of shawls, nearly every style and kind, comprising brooch and long and square shawls of white, blue, and green, drab, and crimson centers, plain cashmeres, blue, green, drab, and black, printed cashmeres suitable for the present season, black and colored souk, and pretty much every kind of shawl you need, up to and including morning shawls, opera shawls. What if you wore an opera shawl to a morning gathering? Boy, you'd never live that down. Another one. Olmsted & Co. was also occasionally known to copy this sort of thing with their own. Shawls! Shawls! Large arrivals, new and desirable styles. L.D. Olmsted & Co. wished to call the attention of their customers to their very superior stock of brooch mantle shawls. But what if you wore a brooch mantle shawl to the opera instead of an opera shawl? Their prices are low. Our unprecedented sales are a sufficient guarantee. Eventually, I particularly like this one, to raise the wind. There are various ways of doing this, but a good one during the 94ish sort of weather had hereabouts from the 13th to the 15th of June is to go to T.B. Carter's, 118 Lake Street, and buy a 3-cent palm leaf fan and commence vibrating it to and fro. A very respectable breeze can be got up on very short, in this way on short no ice. Short no ice? Short notice, okay. It is not every booty, body who keeps these 3-cent fans. Being in Troy, New York last year in some of the meltingest kind of weather, we tried to get one and couldn't. And here you see like a great advertising strategy. You create the need for something. You create the fear that somebody might not have something when they need it. At T.B. Carter's shop, well, this is not T.B. Carter's shop. This is T.B. Carter's grave over at Graceland Cemetery. Here is T.B. Carter, shawl enthusiast. Just over on State and Monroe, one of the first ones to operate on State Street would have been Mrs. Carberry's house. This is the first one owned by a woman. Not a whole lot about Mrs. Carberry is really known. Georgia Carberry is said to be her name. But she was not really as excited about the shawls, but you know that she had shawls, not to mention linings, fancy and plain buttons, an extensive assortment of Zephyr worsteds. I've always wanted a Zephyr worsted. We can also see some of the ads that come up in the paper around this for what kind of things you could buy on sale in Chicago at the time. Was this ad for wigs, invisible ventilating heads of hair. There's a thing that you got to take notice of in here. Ladies furnishing their own hair or that of deceased friends and relatives can have it made into any of the following articles, of which an endless variety of beautiful and substantial patterns, which can be seen at the subscribers' rooms: bracelets, armlets, negligees, finger rings, eardrops, crosses, ladies' and gents' neck chains, watch guards, flowers, wreaths, etc., hair inserted in lockets, brooches, and breastpins, ladies' hair dressed for balls or parties at their residences, hair bought or taken in exchange. All kinds of stuff for hair. Now, what if you, just as that of deceased friends, you could take your deceased friend's hair and have it made into a negligee. It's like, so honey, remember that friend of mine that you always thought was cute and I've always been bugging you about it? How come you keep talking about how cute she is but never me? She died. Guess what I'm wearing? People were weird back then. But this is what these shops probably would have looked like at the time. This is your typical dry goods store. It was a bunch of guys hanging around in a place where nothing really had a fixed price. Everything was down to haggling. And it would just be a place for guys to come and hang around the whiskey barrel all day. There was no television after all. But elsewhere, out in Lockport, New York, lived a young kid by the name of Potter Palmer. Now, Potter Palmer worked for a guy named George Fox, who was a Quaker, and Quakers did not believe in bargaining. Bargaining was standard in most of these stores. Fox didn't believe it, and Potter Palmer thought that was a good way to run the store. But he worked for him in Lockport, New York, up the other side of the Erie Canal, where they were in the process of dredging up rock out of a quarry. Now, one day, Potter Palmer happened to see an order for this huge amount of stone that was being sent to some town called Chicago for their new courthouse, and he had been looking around himself. That's what you do when you're a clerk. You look about you. You look for an opportunity. He saw that this place called Chicago was building an absolutely huge courthouse, figured he should go see it himself. So he went out to a place right about where Ira Couch's place is now. Got himself a room at the Sherman House, then went around and just started arranging to get land. He arranged to get some premises from Mr. High, who is now over here at Graceland. Then decided to go on a trip to find some stock. Went to New York and went to the Marble Palace of A.T. Stewart. He was like the big department store king of New York at the time, even before Chicago really got started. This was his building in the what is now the financial district of Manhattan. This is actually a stop on my walking tour for Grave Robbing 101, because eventually A.T. Stewart, the owner of the place, was stolen out of his crypt and had his bones held for ransom. But he took Potter Palmer around and showed him places like the sewing room on the inside of the place. You know, you didn't buy an outfit at the time. You would buy an outfit and not take it home. It wasn't ready to go. It had to be made up in the sewing room for you. So Potter Palmer got himself a little place on Lake Street that gradually expanded until 1857. There was this massive fire that wrecked a whole lot of buildings on Water Street. Wrecked a whole bunch of them. Apparently there was a fight in a brothel that tipped over some candles. There were different different opinions as to what happened. We do know that John Dickey, who was not far from the High plot, was killed in the fire. So was Mr. High, incidentally. But we can see the stores were crowded from morning to night after this. A lot of stuff was damaged. A lot of the buildings were damaged. So this led to kind of an open space for Potter Palmer to buy a larger place to expand. But this place had very rich goods, such as cannot be found elsewhere in Chicago. They are positively selling every description of goods. Are they selling negligees made from dead people's hair? Because it's not every description of goods if they're not. Being sold at ruinous prices. So Potter Palmer, now having grown himself a nice stylish beard, built himself a large section in the burned out district. This was just good business for him, this fire. So 1858, they opened Potter Palmer's store, which was a dry goods store that he figured out was going to be a little bit different than the others. We've talked about how most of them were full of whiskey barrels and haggling. This, for one thing, did not have haggling, because he had figured out that there was changes going on in society. We were seeing the early stirrings of modern feminism with people like Elizabeth Cady Stanton encouraging women to go out and buy. She had a lot of trouble convincing women that they should go and agitate for the right to vote at the time. But she did say, listen, you're the one who does the cooking. You're the one who ought to be able to buy the stove. You go out, take control of the purse strings, go out and buy. That was kind of the start. So Potter Palmer realized that this was happening and thought, I should cater my store to women. They're the ones who are going to be doing the buying. It seems to be the way the tide is turning. Even just coming up with this idea, announcing to his country customers that if you order something from my store and decide you don't want it, you can return it. Open return policy at the time was something that had never really been tried. People thought, oh man, he's going to be completely broke in a couple of weeks. But as we can all see, he did reasonably well. This would have been about 1861. Now, he had this good idea right around that time, 1861. He thought, this war thing might actually be starting. If we go to war with the South, the price of cotton is going to skyrocket. Just as he had seen like the early stirrings of feminism and how that was going to shape shopping in the next few years, he also saw that the price of cotton was going to buy up soon enough that he bought up lots of it in early 1861. And then the price skyrocketed. So meanwhile, he had a kid working for him by the name of Marshall Field. Eventually had bought into a place called Farwell and Field. He came to Chicago in 1855, got a job paying $400 a year and saved half of it. In 1864, he and Farwell got together and bought into the place. Didn't really get along, but at the same time, he heard rumors that this Potter Palmer guy was A, suffering ill health, and B, thinking about buying. So he managed to scrounge up some money, went to the McCormick brothers to borrow money, which it tells you about all you need to know about Marshall Field, if you ask me. The McCormicks were such horrible human beings. But he moved up from Cooley and Farwell and Funds to Field and Farwell, then Cooley, Farwell, Field and Co. And then eventually on Lake Street, bought up Potter Palmer's place and made it Marshall Field Later and Co. right before the Civil War ended. Now, when this happened, the Civil War ended, and all of a sudden, everything just crashed. 1866, the price of cotton was way down lower, and Marshall Field was left with having bought way more stuff than he really needed to. He tried to get Potter Palmer to go back on the deal, and Potter was just like, you're on your own, kid. But he did end up helping him, becoming like a silent partner, putting some more money into it as an investment before going off to Paris himself. Eventually started buying up land on State Street, figuring, this is going to be the new place. People are going to move away from the river where it smells so bad. State Street is eventually going to be the main thoroughfare. So in 1866, Marshall Field opened up his new store all by himself and started advertising not just things like umbrellas, sun umbrellas, and small wares, and braids and suspenders and linen threads and such like, also selling dry goods and notions. Sewing supplies. Started to slowly expand the stock in here. But then, 1871, the whole place burned down. Massive fire. The entire city burned down, including Marshall Field's place, including the brand new Palmer House Hotel that Potter Palmer had built. But the city shocked everybody by how quickly they rebuilt. This is W.D. Kerfoot's place with a famous sign on the left, all gone but wife, children, and energy. So immediately they set up a new space for Marshall Field, put up this sign where the store used to be saying that cash boys and work girls will be paid what is due them. So good for them on that. Of course, what was due them was like $1.50, $2 a week. The people who went around collecting the cash got absolutely nothing. But he built himself a grand new store here with things like this giant jewelry department. And eventually decided to open up a warehouse because the retail store was really, even well into the 20th century, the retail store was really just an advertisement. It wasn't really a big moneymaker itself. Really, it was just trying to get people, it's like an advertisement for the wholesale business is where the money was. Right here where this parking garage is now was the old Marshall Field warehouse designed by Henry Hobson Richardson. And this is where the money was for them. People would, the State Street store was really just something to make Marshall Field famous, to make there be a demand for Marshall Field goods all over the country. And that's really what worked. And it's still kind of the same thing now. Places that have their flagship stores on Michigan Avenue or Fifth Avenue in New York, those flagship stores are not usually money makers. They're just something that you have there to establish the brand. Now, Field eventually became known for being the first guy to have things like a bargain basement, to have things like the perfume counter right when you walk in the door so you don't just smell all the horse poop from outside anymore, to give the whole place a nice sweet proceedings. Very little of this was Marshall Field's own idea. You know, I took a tour of the old building a while ago, and they talked about the day that he saw women gathering for tea there, and a light bulb went off in his head, and he thought he should have a lunchroom in the store. A light bulb never went off over Marshall Field's head. That old man did not have a lot of original ideas, and I mean, he was old at the age of 18. Really, a lot of his innovations were either just taken from what Potter Palmer had done all along, or after he was in this big store, the big famous store himself on State Street, eventually expanding all the way back to Wabash, was really the idea of Henry Selfridge, who came around in the 1880s. Harry Selfridge was really a young go-getter at the time. He thought, first of all, more telephones in here. His idea was the bargain basement. He increased advertising by 500%, added the tea room in 1890, and over the course of 6 years, he raised the profits of the store by 50%. That's pretty damn good. We'll go through here just a little bit. This is the lace department, the lace and yard goods. And bringing in more phone people meant more phone operators. These were called the Hello Girls. It was a job that could really mess with your head psychologically. We've already seen the watch department. And of course, in 1890, he added the first real restaurant. Eventually, they expanded to have the famous Walnut Room, shown here in 1909, and here in 1959 when they had the giant Christmas tree. And that one is actually still there. Now, the building itself became a Macy's about 15, 20 years ago, but the Walnut Room survives. Selfridge was also one of the first guys to have giant Christmas displays in the windows. It was a very new art, window decoration at the time. And having electric lights so people could see them at night, too. And, of course, by this time it gets, dark at about 4 o'clock. But also their advertising there evolved over time. He put up a lot of bigger and bigger things, but as of 1896, this one, it's still really just text. Our prices are unquestionably the lowest in Chicago. That's absolute crap. There were definitely cheaper places to shop than Marshall Field's. Then by 1903, they've introduced things like only 27 shopping days until Christmas. Almost want to throttle him for that. They have found ways to make the holidays more stressful. 1905, here we are with only 25 shopping days till Christmas. Women's black broadcloth coats, 4 models at $20 each. That's probably about $500 in today's money. Which honestly, for a coat like that, isn't that bad. These new winter coats are made in distinctively new styles and of a fine quality of black broadcloth, interlined and lined throughout with black or pearl gray Skinner satin or with white peau de Sion. I have no idea how I'm pronouncing that. Also, you're going to want some kid gloves for Christmas, of course. Now, the problem is, Harry Selfridge and Marshall Field never got along. Really, nobody actually got along with Marshall Field particularly well. So eventually he just came up to him and said, listen, I've raised your profits 50%. I want to become a partner in this business. I want it to be called Marshall Field and Selfridge. Otherwise, I'm going to go start my own place. And Marshall said, well, I guess you'll be starting your own place then. And Selfridge said, oh, okay, well, I'll work the next 2 weeks and give you my proper notice. And Field said, no, you just go. And so he did. He took out an ad, bought a place right about across the street, and advertised the birth of a new business. Dun, 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 dun. So here's Mr. Selfridge himself. Here is his wife, Rosalie Buckingham Selfridge. That's Buckingham, like the Buckingham Fountain, named for a guy named Clarence Buckingham, who I think was her cousin, possibly her brother. But she was a real estate developer herself. She developed a whole neighborhood called the Rosalie Village down in Hyde Park that we go to now and then on these tours, especially the Hyde Park tour. Reminds me, maybe I should do the Hyde Park tour next week or sometime soon. But they moved into this building. We'll just take a quick look at that. It's now sometimes known as the Goth Target because of the Louis Sullivan design there. Here's an ad for them. Black pony coats. Women's suits reduced. Only 22 shopping days remaining until Christmas. Well, this is what it was Carson Peary Scott. He only lasted at Selfridge there for about a year or so before realizing that all of the good talent, all of the people who were really good at this stuff were still at Marshall Fields and he couldn't poach them away. So eventually he decided to retire. Sold within about a year to Carson Peary and Scott. And initially intended to just go be a yachtsman or something, but he just always needed more of a challenge than that. So he eventually moved over to London and started the Selfridges stores there, which are still around. This is about what the place looked like circa the early 20th century. State and Madison Street, the busiest corner in the world. Of course, that today looks... Well, here's how it looked about the turn of the 20th century. Some of the earliest film footage of Chicago is this same space. And it currently looks about like this. This is so cool to see. I don't know if it was on TikTok or what, but I've had a lot of school groups get very excited to see the Goth Target. There's an excellent PBS series on Harry Selfridge a while ago. Really a fun watch. Now we're going to go a little bit further downstate. Now, the thing about both Selfridges and Marshall Fields is that they were fancy. They were expensive places. Even with a bargain basement, these were high-quality, expensive goods. So down here, about where the Akira is now, in the 1870s came a place called The Fair at State and Adams. This was the lower priced version. It looked really nice on the inside. The stuff was a whole lot cheaper, probably more cheaply made too as well. That's how these things go. This is how it looked in the 1870s when it was brand new. Pretty soon it expanded to look like this. And then by 1897 it looked like this. It looked on the outside just about like Marshall Fields, really. And really on the inside, it wasn't too much different. You can also see here, the largest and grandest store in the world, now being pushed to completion. 677,500 square feet. Just for comparison, that's about 15% the size of the Sears Tower right there. That's about a 4 million square footer. We'll see what they were selling. Shirtwaists for under $1, boys' suits for $1.50. Rockers $1.50, ribbons 15 cents, handkerchiefs a dime, sugar 35 cents. Very big variety of stock here, all pretty cheap. Ooh, syringes 21 cents. Just what I want for Christmas, some syringes. And on the inside, it looked very nice too. It didn't really, they managed to make it look like it was very fancy in there. And clearly they were very successful. The Lehman family actually has 2 mausoleums here in Chicago. The Lehman family who owned this place. They've got this one at Forest Home Cemetery that they never actually used. But it was said to be rigged up with electricity so they could have lights on it at night. But then they didn't use it even after going to all that trouble. You can actually buy it from Forest Home now at like a bargain rate of $200,000. It probably needs a lot of upkeep too. But that is dirt cheap for a mausoleum like this today. Plus those lions ought to scare anybody away. But they built themselves a little bit of a smaller, classier place up at Graceland Cemetery eventually. But some other shops around the vicinity, we had the Boston store, which was at State and Madison, another department store. You can still see the sign for it up there if you look. We'll kind of zoom in on that. You can also get your bearings across the road. It would have stood right about here. This was a Sears for a long time. But it looked like this. You can still see some ads for it and ghost signs around town. There's a photograph of it from 1902, when it would have been really pretty new. They had They also had a pretty nice restaurant in there. The Boston Store Grill was very well regarded. And in 1935, let's see what they were selling. Christmas gift values. Drugs over on the left. We're gonna move this. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger so we can see what kind of drugs they were selling for Christmas. I want a cup of syringes for Christmas. Phillips Milk of Magnesia, 27 cents. Some cough syrup that was probably mostly booze for 59 cents. Pertololiger laxative for 70 cents. Merry Christmas, one and all. The mouthwash for 55 cents. And Abbott's Olive Oil for $3.09. That must have been some pretty fancy oil. But drugs were on the 7th floor, as you can see. Alka-Seltzer tablets were 49 cents. Over here, perfume for $20. That would have been a lot in 1935 for perfume. Potter and Mitchum lavender, a men's set for $1. Some hat stuff for $3.50. A $1 makeup box, yours for 89 cents. That perfume is more than half off of the suggested retail price. Pretty good deals here, really. This is neat stuff to see, what people wanted to buy in those days. Shaving kit for $2.95. That's pretty nice shaving stuff at the time. Boys 2-piece hair set. That's just what they want. It's a regular $1 Mickey Mouse brush set. Oh, cool. That's probably going for a little bit more than $1 nowadays. Or 59 cents. But I would be absolutely remiss if I were talking about old school shopping in Chicago if I didn't talk about one of my favorite places, Western Hall on 72 Randolph Street. Move up here. A frantic appeal to the citizens of Chicago. Why will you buy clothing at any other house when you can get better styles and finer goods at lower prices at Western Hall? Good question. These guys had more fun with advertising than anybody in Chicago in the 1870s. Or 1860s, really. If you have been paying too much, hear me for my cause, citizens. You have been paying too much for clothing. If you seek proof, call at Western Hall Clothing, Merchants and Tailoring, and Gents Furnishing Establishments. Here they were at Christmas. Ho for the holidays. Christmas comes but once a year, a new business feature for Chicago, a handsome Christmas gift with every article sold during the holidays at Western Hall Clothing House. You see, even in the 1860s, they were occasionally known to just say the holidays. But eventually they hired this guy to be the bard of Western Hall who wrote long poems and ballads for their advertisements. Paradise Found by the Bard of Western Hall. We'll just cover the last verse here. I'll just do some elocution. Then sat he down with hope all dead, until of Western Hall he read. 72 Randolph Street he sought, a suit of Degnan's cut he bought, and hastening home again to try, read triumph in the nymph's bright eye. Joy, joy, he cried, my advice to all is buy your clothing at Western Hall. The Western Hall bard became slightly famous around Chicago. Exactly who he was, I've never been able to determine. Given the time, it might have been Weldon Cobb. Might have been. The bard of Western Hall, whoever he be, has certainly achieved an enviable local notoriety and invested the house he has immortalized. Well, immortalized in that it's 150 years later and I'm still talking about it. with a strange historic interest, and though he is reported as the recipient of a princely salary, like all poets, of course, could evidently leave footprints in the sand of time in some other branch of literature. Well, he might have done that, depending on who he was. Weldon Cobb was writing this kind of stuff for newspapers around that general period. I'd have to double check. But Western Hall eventually ran my favorite advertisement of all time. Early 1865, the Union took back Richmond from the Confederates. Go Union. So they ran this ad, Richmond has fallen. And so have prices at Western Hall Clothing House, 72 Randolph Street, J.H. Smith & Son Clothiers and Furniture. I love this. This is like something you'd see on The Simpsons. Richmond has fallen. And so have our prices. Love it. But then eventually, by the 1970s, State Street was looking a little bit different than it had before. It was gotten a whole lot grubbier. A lot of the theaters had become like blaxploitation theaters and kung fu movie theaters. So meanwhile, in the 1970s, shopping was starting to move to malls. People were just going out to the suburbs to shop at the mall instead. And of course, now we're into a whole other part of the cycle. Yesterday on Twitter, there was some pictures going around of the American Dream Mall in East Rutherford, New Jersey, which is a mall/theme park. And often you go to these malls these days and it's like half of the stores seem to be empty. There's nobody walking around. That's what the Meadowlands Mall is like. This enormous complex that is only 3 years old and already looks like a dead 70s mall someplace in suburbia. But they decided what they should do with State Street is turn it into a mall. This was a rendering of it. They decided they would close it to traffic other than buses, which turned out not to work out so well. They kept the State Street bus lines going, but that meant you still had bus exhaust fumes all over the place. But other than that, it would all be expanded pedestrian traffic. So they opened it October of 1979, still with buses getting in the way, which really kind of defeated the whole purpose of having it be a pedestrian space. But here's what State and Lake had looked like at the time when they were putting it in here. We can see what's showing at the, Blackula is showing at the Chicago Theater. Love at First Bite. You can see the other theaters across the street. Marshall Field, you can see the clock a couple of blocks down there. Just a little bit. But this is when they were putting things together. And the fixtures that they put in, it really does look like if you had a roof over it, this would just look like a suburban mall from the 1970s. The same kind of art, the same kind of benches. Problem is it just didn't work out as well as they'd wanted to do, partly because the buses were still there. So eventually that all just shut down. They converted it back to like it is now, but it's still mostly mall shops around there. We're just going to take a quick look at some of the graves of these people at Marshall Field. This is Potter Palmer himself, the real innovator of Chicago department stores. And the guy who swooped in and took all the credit, Marshall Field. We'll take a quick look. I got a minute or so left. Let's take a quick look at some of the windows from 2020. The Marshall Field and Company windows were all set up. And sometime this week, we'll go and check out the this year's edition. They're still keeping up with Harry Selfridge's old tradition of having fantastic windows here. This particular year, they went with really saturated colors. And the redoing of these subway stations is still kind of a carryover from the State Street Mall era. You still kind of see some of the footprints of it. Sometime this week, we'll go check out this year's edition. Yeah, keeping in mind, though, this is from 2020. This is before the vaccines. People were still much more leery of going out. But also, I tend to film these things super early in the morning when there's nobody out anyway. There you can just see the inside, still with the jewelry and the perfume on the lower counters. They're kind of a laid-back set of the windows this particular year. But, I've also got some of the 2021 windows. Let's check those out after we see this one. There's Mr. Fantastic coming to bring the toys. Check out from the other side here. Oh, this was that period when my phone was messed up, when my phone screen was messed up, too. Everything's a little bit washed out. But this was a whole story they set up last year with Tiptoe the Reindeer. And walking along, you could follow Tiptoe's whole saga. How is an owl to teach reindeer to fly? They should really have a reindeer teacher for this one. We could use a QR. You could use a QR code and hear the whole thing. Learning the valuable lesson that anything is possible if you believe. Like, I believe we will get 10 new Patreons tonight. Most of you are on it, I know. But all right, everybody. I haven't listed next week's tour yet, so this is a weird thing. You know, we're in the period of where I don't really have walking tours or anything, so we're just going to put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will hang out like we always do. So, all right, thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Adam for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Here's Benny, and we'll hang out.
To say, get happy.
Yeah, my phone had a messed up screen at the time. When I took it to the Apple store and they fixed it. I believe I had a Swatch watch myself. Those of you talking about swatches in there. When do department stores have Santas? When do they start? I'm not really sure offhand. Yeah, now it made everybody want to go shopping. All right. And Michelle, I didn't have time for the candy stores in this one. Right across from Fields would have been Kranz's. And we just went to the home of the founder of Fannie Mae this morning. That was originally on LaSalle, then expanded. Welcome to my candy store. You just gotta prove you're not anymore. Did Marshall Fields inspire Dayton's in Minneapolis? I don't know. That's out of my jurisdiction. Hey, Greg, I'm not sure when this department store Santa started exactly. Obviously, it was long entrenched by the time of Miracle on 34th Street in the 30s. Yeah, welcome anybody new tonight. Molly, get well soon. Yeah, these are my wife puts up the stockings. I haven't set up my menorah yet. Didn't large department stores have a candy department? Often they did, yes. Yeah, one day soon, probably, I would say maybe Saturday, day after tomorrow. In 1947 was Miracle on 34th. Huh, I thought it was older than that. Okay, block the person sending the adult dating chat stuff on YouTube. Yeah, there's definitely a stocking for the cats over there. But shh. Don't let them know. They will tear it right down. Ooh, what would be in the Marshall Fields pneumatic tube room now? I wonder. Hey, Katie. Well, quick plug, the Venmo is right there. PayPal address is adam@mysteriouschicago.com. Am I going to live stream the Zoo Lights? If I go, I will, for sure. Uh, 1862 at the Macy's in Herald Square. Interesting. Well, that's the oldest mention that they could find at the time, whenever they wrote that. Nowadays, so much more has been digitized, we won't be able to find more. YouTube is getting absolutely spammed by dating sites. All right, xxx69.biz, you're gone. Arlie, we have a little tree that is out in the hall. Well, we also got an electric menorah this year because Miles loves fire. Oh yeah, lunch at the Walnut Room was a big deal. Still is for some people. I really like the Walnut Room myself. Oh, Christy, you guys got a live tree? Whoa. I don't think I've been in a house with a live tree in many years. Now, Capone was at the Marshall Field. We can't actually trace him to that. It came out at his trial that he used to go there to buy his underpants. Custom-tailored union suits made out of ladies' glove silk.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward again, singing "I've Got a Feeling You're Foolin'."
I don't know where we would put an actual tree in here. Gregory, he does both. His birthday comes right after the holidays, too, so we don't do, like, presents every 8 nights or anything. Did I visit Chicago as a kid? Yes, I did. I was here in the 80s and the 90s. Yeah, I don't want them silky, see? Thank you, Leah. Ceramic tree. That sounds like something off Charlie Brown's Christmas. I feel like the cats would knock that over just as much. Where did Miles go, anyway? Oh, here's Miles. Miles is presently just sitting over here on the green chair, just cooling. Cooling out, maxing, relaxing. Today has been a long day of Johann Hawk work for me. But I've been doing Johann Hawk stuff pretty much exclusively the last few days. Just going through thousands, literally over 1,000 articles, making sure I've got all the important stuff. Thanks, Judy. I am very fond of my mid-century modern style stuff as well. Chair is the latest edition. The box, I don't know what we're dealing with. 'Tis the season of stress and clutter. I'm glad you're digging that, Brad. I love these myself. Go on Society6.com, you can get a huge range of mid-century home furnishings designed by, lots of artist design patterns and stuff. We get a great deal of this stuff, like you can see the floor pillow on the ground over there that kind of basically matches the curtains. And these cool geometric pattern pillows, those are from there too. Graduated into grandma decor, yeah. I was just, Layla was just showing me a picture of this estate sale she wants to go to on Saturday. And, it's all like antique, Baroque type stuff, the kind of stuff Layla Royale really digs. And my first thought looking at the pictures of was, are we old enough that they're going to let us into this? And that was just kind of me like reverting, seeing this very, very grown-up stuff. Like, man, they're not going to let me into that. And it's like, no, I'm 42. They'll probably let me into the auction. Or the estate sale.
Like gems of rubies, with the stars reflected in the rubies, lips like honey drips.
Well, by the way, is there a Carmen out there? I don't know who this Carmen person is, and I have to show you these emails I just got from Carmen today. They weren't at the normal email that you would find looking online, so I don't think it's someone who would have looked me up based on this stuff. But I got 2 emails from this Carmen person with, the first one has no body, just a subject. It says, "You are a ass." That's the whole email. That was it. Well, a couple hours later, she noted that you can stop trying to get money. Money! It won't work, you ass. So I don't know who this person is. I've never had an email from them before. Their name does not come up when I try to search it. It could be something to do with the old publisher or something. I don't know. At this point, when it comes to publishing, I don't know what to believe. Yeah, it wasn't Eric Carmen. Carmen's the first name. I know that from the email address. But somebody from whom I'm trying to get... Well, they're probably going for one of the other Adam Seltzers. Maybe the one in Portland or maybe the one in Ohio. Who I believe has done some landlord and property management type stuff. So we get each other's mail occasionally. Would that be a kid from one of the school tours? Probably not at this point. I haven't done one in about 6 months. Oh yeah, I did all the usual look-up stuff. It's, didn't bring anything up. Now and then we get people like saying, you actually ask for tips for these things. Now and then that happens. And you didn't even mention my hometown where Al Capone totally had a resort. Now we gotta watch for Carmen. But yeah, now and then there are people, like, if it had happened between 8 and 9, I'd think it was maybe somebody who donated $5 on Eventbrite and then couldn't get this to work and thought the whole thing was a scam. I used to get that a lot when we got started. Just a lot. People who couldn't figure out Facebook Live or read the instructions at all.
And how they love those fast ones. And now, Benny Goodman signs off with Someday, Sweetheart.
Thanks, Cindy. Shawls! We could totally do a t-shirt of that, you know. Shawls! But you kept my old shawl from that very first week. Yep, us gambling kingpins. We always get these weird emails like that. Because I'm a place with book-related stuff that I gotta be working on. I gotta be checking email constantly. Mysterious Chicago brand shawls. I wonder who'll print those up for me. Who wears a shawl these days? Somebody must. The night charge of Eventbrite. That's interesting. Luckily, it's the time of year when I'm not totally reliant on Eventbrite for tours and stuff. Katie, that's quite possible. I believe that is like the kind of money, the kind of things that Elizabeth Gerke was probably sending to Johann Hawk. What she was saying to him in what she was saying to him in jail. You didn't get my money, you ass! Shawls and smut. That's what we got around here. Shawls and smut. Shawls and smut and nothing but. Shawls, smut, ass. Well, Katie, was it a morning cape at least? I mean, you wouldn't want to be wearing an opera cape to a funeral. Or a morning cape to an opera. It's like using a salad fork for the second course.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
WEAF, New York.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Reading that side, because then she with their ID, there's probably not much they can do about it. And more people should be wearing capes, honestly. We can all be like Lando and have maybe too many capes. But all right, Benny Goodman is wrapping up, everybody, so I believe that it's time for me to wrap up as well. So thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I know who we're finding for Find a Grave Friday tomorrow. Might be a little bit of a challenge, but hopefully not too much because it looks like it's going to be raining and cold and December-y. But you know I like it like that. So all right, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours, telling everybody to stay safe and stay strong. And of course, if you can, stay awake. I won't be doing that. But stay spooky, everybody. Have a great day.